All right, let's dive in. Today we're talking about Bitcoin. But this isn't just another story about digital money. Nope. This is a journey that starts with a pretty simple idea for peer-to-peer cash and ends with a fundamental technological puzzle that some of the smartest engineers are still trying to crack.
It all boils down to one simple question. If I have a dollar bill and I hand it to you, that's it. I can't then turn around and hand that same dollar to someone else. It's gone. But with digital stuff, it's just copy-paste. So how on earth do you create digital money that you can't just spend over and over and over again? This is what's known as the double spending problem, and it was the huge hurdle that had to be cleared to make digital cash a real thing.
Okay, so before we get to the solution, we've got to understand the old way of doing things. Our story here actually begins not with some fancy code, but with a very human problem: how we trust each other with money on the internet.
Just think about it for a second. When you buy something online, you're not really paying the merchant directly, are you? You're asking your bank to please go talk to their bank. As the mysterious Satoshi Nakamoto pointed out, the internet just didn't have a built-in way to transfer value. We had to lean on these big financial institutions, these trusted third parties, to basically vouch for us and to stop that double spending problem.
And this is where you start to see the hidden costs of that trust. Relying on these middlemen, it's not free. They have to step in and mediate disputes, which adds costs and makes tiny little payments, like buying a coffee, totally impractical. And because transactions can be reversed, merchants have to be super cautious, which means they end up collecting way more of your personal data than they should need. And at the end of the day, a certain amount of fraud is just accepted. It's written off as the cost of doing business.
So, with the problem clearly laid out, this mysterious person, or maybe a group, who went by Satoshi Nakamoto, came along in 2008 and proposed something totally radical: a system that didn't rely on trust at all.
This quote right here gets to the absolute core of the idea. Instead of a central authority like a bank calling the shots, Satoshi proposed a system based on pure cryptographic proof. It would allow any two people to transact directly with each other. And the solution? A network where absolutely everyone could see every transaction, making it almost impossible to cheat.
The incredible technology that makes this all possible is the blockchain. And honestly, that analogy of a public digital notary is perfect. I want you to imagine a giant shared notebook that's open for everyone in the world to see. Every single time a transaction happens, a new line gets added to the notebook. And here's the magic. Once a line is written, it can never be erased or changed because everyone has their own copy and would immediately spot any funny business.
So you might be wondering, who gets to write the next line in this public notebook? I mean, you can't just have a free-for-all, right? Well, that's where a clever system called proof of work comes in. Think of it like a massive global lottery. Computers on the network, which we call miners, they bundle up all the recent transactions into a block. Then they all race to solve an incredibly difficult math puzzle. The first one to find the solution gets to broadcast their block, add it to the chain, and as a reward for their effort, they get some brand new Bitcoin. It's this intense competition that secures the entire network and makes it so hard for any one person to mess with the history.
But here's where things get really wild. The invention of this trustless public ledger. It opened up possibilities that go way, way beyond just a new form of cash. It turned out to be the missing piece for an idea that had been floating around for more than a decade: smart contracts.
What's so fascinating is that this idea of self-executing contracts, it isn't new at all. A computer scientist named Nick Szabo was talking about this way back in 1996. The problem was always enforcement. I mean, how could you trust the computer that was running the contract? The blockchain, that public notary we were just talking about, was the final piece of the puzzle. It gave us a neutral, verifiable place where code could finally run as law.
Szabo's own definition here is incredibly insightful. He used the perfect analogy: a vending machine. Think about it. You put in your money, that's you fulfilling your side of the promise. The machine, just by following its internal programming, gives you a snack. That's it fulfilling its promise. The entire contract is baked right into the machine itself. It automatically enforces the terms. A smart contract just tries to do that for all sorts of digital agreements.
This comparison really highlights the massive shift in thinking. We're moving from legal jargon enforced by a really slow and expensive court system to precise computer code that is just automatically enforced by the network itself. The whole goal is to cut down on ambiguity and the crazy costs of enforcement by making the agreement just run itself.
Okay, this all sounds pretty revolutionary, right? But here it comes. This is the engineer's dilemma. This powerful new technology doesn't come for free. It involves this deep and really complex set of trade-offs, especially when it comes to how fast the network can be versus how secure it is.
So to understand this dilemma, we've got to look at something called the stale block rate. Remember that global lottery? Well, sometimes two miners solve that puzzle at almost the exact same time. And because it takes time for their solutions to travel across the globe, you can briefly get two competing versions of the chain. Eventually, the network picks one to keep building on, and the block on that shorter, abandoned chain becomes stale. It's a perfectly valid block, but it basically represents wasted work and wasted energy.
And right here is where that trade-off becomes crystal clear. Just look at this data. Ethereum was designed to be way faster than Bitcoin. We're talking a new block every 15 seconds compared to 10 minutes. But that speed comes at a price, a much higher stale block rate. And because of that inefficiency, research shows that to get the same level of security for your transaction, you need more confirmations. That just means more blocks added to the chain after yours. For Bitcoin, 6 confirmations is kind of the gold standard. For Ethereum, you'd need around 37 to feel just as safe. The faster speed creates a security challenge.
So what's the real-world consequence? This chart nails it. A higher stale rate makes it easier and cheaper for an attacker to try and reverse a transaction, to pull off a double spend. On a healthy, efficient network, an attack is only really worth it if the transaction is for a huge amount of money. But on a network with a high stale rate, it suddenly becomes profitable for an attacker to go after much smaller amounts.
So, after this whole journey through trust, technology, and all these tricky trade-offs, where does that leave us? Well, it brings us right to the core challenge of the entire blockchain space.
Let's just do a quick recap of the path we've taken. We started with that fundamental problem of online trust. Then we saw how Bitcoin came in with a wild solution, this peer-to-peer trustless ledger. That innovation then unlocked the potential for this much older idea of smart contracts. But, and this is the big one, all of this forced us to face that fundamental trade-off, that tension between speed and security.
And here it is. This is the ultimate takeaway. If anyone ever tells you that they've built the best blockchain, they are missing the entire point. The reality is it's a constant balancing act. Do you want it to be incredibly fast? Well, you might have to give up some decentralization or security. Do you want it to be unbelievably secure? Well, it's probably going to be slow. Every single design choice is a trade-off.
So I'm going to leave you with this question, because this isn't just a technical puzzle for engineers anymore. As these technologies get more and more woven into our daily lives, from our finances to our digital identities, we all have a stake in the answer. So, as we build our digital future, what is the right balance between moving fast and staying secure? That's the huge conversation this technology has started. Thanks for tuning in.